So it's been about 2 years since we got this E46 M3 back on the road. A couple months after we got it back on the road, we did this to it. We painted the whole car with Autoflex, which is like a plastic dip, but it's a little bit more professional grade. And after that, we drove it for a couple of months, and then it's just sat. So for the last year, this car pretty much hasn't been driven at all. And the reason is because there is something wrong with it. Now, this is a 2004 BMW M3 convertible, but it does have an SMG transmission, which is practically a manual transmission, but all of the manual activities that you would normally do, like the clutch, shifting, all of that is done through a hydraulic actuator. So it's a whole hydraulic system. It's very similar to the one that's used on the Ferrari, the F1 transmission that they have. It's very similar to that, and that's probably what's wrong with this. Now, we literally parked it because we were driving multiple times. This has happened where it would get a stoplight and then it would just stop. Like, it would not shift. It would be stuck. You couldn't even get into first. You can't go into reverse. You can't go even into neutral. It won't even go into neutral. So whatever gear it was in, it would get stuck and then nothing would happen, right? So that happened a few times, and then ever since then we just parked it because we didn't have enough time to fix it, but now we're finally going to do that. And there's a few other things that we want to do as well. Possibly even take off this post Taco Bell paint job that we have, but it's pretty bad underneath as well. But maybe we'll get to that after we've got it running and driving again. Now, one of the other things that we've noticed after we did all of this stuff and we drove it for, a couple months, we put on about 1,500, 2,000 miles, maybe a little bit more. It started overheating every now and then. There's a bunch of grinding noises coming from the rear end. The shifting before the whole SMG stuff started acting up was pretty good. So what we're going to do first is I am going to scan the car, and we're going to go through this whole diagnostic process and just give it a quick once over, look over everything, and then hopefully we figure out what's wrong and get to fixing. I haven't opened the hood. It's been a few months, so let's see what's underneath. And it's been raining like crazy outside, so we did wash it, gave it a quick wash a couple weeks back, and then since then it's rained, and as you can see, it's still dripping. I mean, there's an S54 in there, and we didn't really do much to this S54 once we got it up and running. Probably needs a few things on there. I think we did belts. I think we did a couple pulleys here and there. But the reason I'm opening this, main thing I want to take a look at is the SMG reservoir, just to see how much fluid's in there, if it's leaking and whatnot. And then we'll get it lifted up. We'll do the scan and go from there. Now, my suspicions with the symptoms that we have so far, where it just randomly stops going into any gear, the SMG, the gear light on the dash did come on at one point, and we are good on fluid. Actually, we might be a little bit overfilled. But no, we're good with the fluid. Now, as I was saying, the symptoms are pointing me to either the actual pump itself or the actual gear position sensor on the top. I'd rather have it be the gear position sensor. We do have a spare pump. We have a spare gear position sensor. And this is at the very top of the transmission, and it's pretty much letting the computer know which gear the transmission is in, and it helps with the whole selection process. So I think it's that, but we're going to find out here in a little bit. All right, so first things first, we got to scan the car. So I'm just going to use my BMW software, INPA. It's one of the easiest. We actually have a video on how to set it up, and since then it's gotten even easier. If you look on the forums, you can find a one-click installer. So if you ever have any E-chassis cars, so E90 and older, that are OBD2, INPA software with one of these cables that you can get off of Amazon, I'll have that link down below, you're going to be set. You can pretty much diagnose, you can test a lot of things. It is factory level software. All right, with that being said, so let's go ahead and scan. We're going to scan the SMG system first and see exactly what fault codes are stored on there. So right now, there is a traction control light and yellow brake light on. And that can just be a speed sensor or something like that. But the gear light is not on, and that could be because I had the battery disconnected. So maybe it fixed itself. But the problem is, right, I'm just not confident in taking this car out anywhere, because if it does what it did in, the middle of the street, what am I going to do then? All right, so we're going to scan this transmission. Let's see what's going on. All right, errors. All right, so there's two errors. There's an error 37, which is usually for that position sensor, gear position sensor. The other one is error 36, which is also for that position sensor. So if we're just going based off of the codes, I think we just gotta replace that position sensor. And honestly, that is the only two errors, the 36 and 37. The other thing that I want to check is we're gonna scan the engine itself, see what else is on there. So this is the 2004, so it's got the MSS 54 HP DME, which is an upgraded version of the one that was on here before, which was MSS 54, which was on the earlier 2003 and older E46 M3s. Now, a lot of the stuff between convertible and coupe are gonna be the same, obviously besides the top. So almost all the other stuff that you would do diagnostics-wise, all the videos that we have on the S54 and E46 M3 in general are all gonna apply here as well. Engine-wise, errors, we've got two, 106 and 156. Ooh, 156 is not good. So 156 is an internal error. That's for the EEPROM on the DME itself. So, that's not a good idea. That's definitely not what I was hoping to find. I was hoping to find nothing, obviously, but it's a BMW. It's gonna be something in there. So 106 and 156. The 156 could also be a voltage issue. So I did know before when we were driving it, the positive terminal was tightened up, but it was still kind of loose and wiggling on that battery. So that can cause all kinds of havoc on all of the systems. Unfortunately, that's not our SMG problem because I fixed that and then it still happened, but that error could be from that. And we've got error 106, and I'm not too worried about that one either. So we're gonna go ahead and erase those for the time being, and hopefully they don't come back. Fingers crossed. Yep, so no more errors right now. Now we're gonna scan the DSC module for that traction control light and the yellow brake light. So we're gonna scan that module and see what's stored in there. And here's the thing, right? So a lot of these modules, they communicate with each other. So if you have an issue with something, chances are it can trigger something else, when in reality, it's just that one item that was wrong. And then obviously voltage, that will wreak havoc on everything. All right, so we've got 5 errors in the DSC module. We've got one just DSC module low voltage, so under 9 volts. And we've got another one for the DSC module itself, one of the pressure sensors, and another pressure sensor. I think all of these are voltage related, so I'm just gonna clear these and hope for the best. That's cleared. Oh, one came back right away, 5E24. So I'm not too worried about that one. I think it might solve itself once we actually drive it. This could be alignment related as well. So a lot of these sensor codes, yes, if it's pointing directly to a pressure sensor, chances are that sensor is bad. But you also want to make sure everything else is good first before you start really, replacing things. For example, stuff that we know, which would be the alignment's wrong. And that's because one of the control arms on the back is bent, which we're going to replace that too. So you want to do process of elimination. You don't want to just start replacing parts. You want to fix the stuff that you know is wrong first and then go from there. All right, so I think we've got our game plan cut out for us. Time to lift her up. A bunch of starters. So we've got a few sensors on the transmission, but the gear position sensor that we are looking for is actually on top of the drive shaft. It's way up in there, so we're going to remove all of this stuff, the exhaust, the covers, the drive shaft, and then we'll be able to get access to that. So the gear position sensor, the car just doesn't know where that gear selector rod is. That's the problem. So this measures how the rod's going this way and this way. Oh. So this right here
is the gear position sensor.
This is what's wrong. So goes in and out, just not properly. Goes side to side, also not properly. And then also I know what's another issue which I need to order, I should have ordered this already, is the compression spring that's on the side of the transmission. So that's usually when it breaks. There's a compression spring, it helps with the gear selection, and it usually is between second and third. That shift, when that happens, if you have an SMG, it takes forever or it starts flashing. Usually that compression spring is broken, and we have a video on that as well. But the only problem with that is usually you got to take the transmission down. So we've got the old sensor off. Here is a new one. It's not actually new. It's a used one I had laying around, but I'm pretty sure it's good. So what we're going to do is we're going to reinstall this one, this new used one, and then we're going to run all the adaptations, make sure that the sensor is good, make sure everything is working as it should, and then after that, we'll put everything back together. So as you guys saw, to remove the old one, we did drop the transmission back a little bit, which is why we took off the drive shaft, the exhaust, and all of that stuff. So I'm going to bring the transmission back down, just the back corner. You don't really need to disconnect anything to do this, but you want to make sure that the fan in the front, in the fan shroud, it's not hitting up against the fan shroud so you don't break the fan blades. So you only want to lower it just enough for you to get the sensor back on. So the sensor needs to go back into here, but it has to be oriented a certain way. So I'm going to show you, I had this whole assembly pulled off from another vehicle. I'm going to show you exactly how it needs to go in and the orientation. You can see there's a slot inside of there that it needs to slide into. So here's the inside of that shaft. So this needs to go in like this, and then you have to slide it over. All right, so it goes in, and then it slides over. And then you can push it in. Now these are hex screws, size 4. You could put a little bit of Loctite if you want on them. That way it doesn't come back off. But I'm not going to do it right now because we're going to test it first and make sure everything is good. Now ideally, you should buy a new one. I didn't want to buy a new one just because we don't know how long we're going to keep this car SMG. So I just want to use what I had laying around. All right, so now we just need to plug these connectors in. So the white one's going to go on the top, and the black one goes on the bottom. Now you want to slide these into their grooves. You can see there's a little tab right there, so it just slides in. Both of our connectors are actually broken, so we're just going to leave it like that for right now so we can go ahead and run the adaptations and make sure everything is good before we secure everything. Now before you run any adaptations, you do want to make sure that your SMG fluid is topped up. So this takes CHF 11S hydraulic fluid. And we're good. And then you also want to have some sort of a battery charger on here with 10 amps. That way, when we're doing all the adaptations, the car's not going to be on. So whatever power it takes, especially if you have a weak battery, you don't want to have any issues happen in that moment. All right, so in order for us to actually reset the adaptations, we do need to have a specific version of INPA. Most INPA versions do have it available. You just have to go into the INI file and you can edit it to make it work. So I'll put a screenshot up on the screen of what your INI file needs to look like. Once you've done that, you do need to close out of all of your INPA programs, and then you do have to run the compiler. So you run the INPA compiler, and then you view the errors, you exit out of it, and then it should reset your INPA to enable the special test. So that's what we're looking for. If your INPA already has a section that says special test, then you're good to go. If it doesn't, then you have to do what I'm about to put on the screen with that INI file. Now, we've got all of that taken care of. Now we're going to open up the special test. So it's going to be Shift F2. Once you have the special test open, there should be a section that says SMG adaptation for sequential M gearbox. So that's what we're going to select. Now we're going to do a complete adaptation. Now that we've finished the full adaptations through INPA, you could also use DIS, you could also use ISTA, but you do have to run those full adaptations every time you change that gear position sensor. It's also known as the gear identification switch, depending on where you go. I'll have all that stuff linked down below. I'll also have the torque specs linked down below. But now we're gonna put the drive shaft and all the stuff back together, and we can actually take it out for a test drive, and fingers crossed, it's fixed. So it's been about 2 weeks, we've been driving the car, and the transmission is perfect now. It shifts just fine, there's no more gear lights coming on. We took it when it was cold, when it was hot, we even took it through a car wash and let it get wet. Everything is good, so the adaptations and all that stuff passed with flying colors. But as you can see, the car is back in on the lift, and it's already torn back apart, because now we're actually fixing the diff for all those grinding noises and all that stuff that I was talking about earlier in this video. So stay tuned for that. We're gonna have a whole M-clunk repair, hopefully, and as well as all of the grinding noise from the differential from the limited slip diff. We're gonna have a video on that here soon, so stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions, leave them down below. If you need some one-on-one diagnostic help or whatnot, you can check out my website, www.shoplivetv.com. See you guys in the next one.